Learning how to perform a headstand. Learning a skill takes practice with a number of factoring elements. Each learner is made up of a complex system and have their own degrees of freedom which need to be identified when practicing a skill. These elements in some individuals may enhance or inhibit self-organisation and coordinative structures. A constraint-led approach to learning a skill manipulates task, environmental, and organismic constraints. Deconstructing these influencing factors allows for the simplest tasks of the skill to be learnt first, and then increasing constraints to reach the end goal of performing the entire task in the appropriate environment. For the following program, the constraint-led approach was applied to learn the skill of a headstand. A headstand, also known as Salamba Sharasana, is the action of balancing on your head using your hands for support. This posture requires precision, stability, and focus. It mostly utilizes the neck, spine, and core to create a stable contraction state and balance to construct a vertical line with the body upside down. The constraints-led approach to learning this skill of performing a headstand is appropriate as the task is easily manipulated in terms of task and environmental constraints, which allows the learner to self-discover their stable state or attractor state from the individual's preferred movement pattern to the most functional coordination as the skill is acquired. Self-discovery is made through small progressions and skill breakdown, which has been found to deliver the best results when learning a new skill. This is due to the subsystems within the dynamical system that work together to create a movement. This way of learning enables the individual to develop their best functional coordination through practice, error, and intrinsic feedback. It is a hands-off approach that utilizes perception-action coupling from their recognition of information to adjust to the task demands. Evidently, using the constraint-led approach to learn how to perform a headstand allowed for intrinsic feedback to be a foundational part of the process, allowing for the individual to receive and perceive information to alter their coordination pattern. Degrees of freedom were also decreased and increased throughout the program to allow the individual to adapt and utilize this to influence their movements. This theory identified that the body is made up of dynamical systems combined of subsystems that includes muscles, ligaments, and joints. This way of learning developed the control of these subsystems through phases of increasing control for the desired movement pattern. The method to learning the skill of performing a headstand was broken into 1-hour blocks over a 20-day period. The goal of the program is to be able to perform the task of a headstand freely for 10 seconds. The task constraints were deconstructed to the simplest form by learning the leg lift and kick back first, using the wall for support. After this temporary state of coordination was met, the wall was removed from practice and the individual had to adapt to the absence of the wall. In order to minimize the negative effect of environmental factors on the skill, the learner began against a wall to provide support and a flat surface for the base of the body to create a fixed environment. Through success, the learner performed the task freely without support of a wall in an outdoor environment to create a variable environment for the individual to adjust to. The skill was performed in a variety of environmental circumstances and task constraints. This identified that the learner developed a functional coordination pattern and attractor state. The theory and framework used was Newell's model of motor learning. In this template, there are 3 distinct stages of adaptive behavior recognized for learning. As coordination and degrees of freedom change, so does skill acquisition. Stage 1 was assembling a coordination pattern. Stage 2, gaining control of coordinative structure. Stage 3, skilled optimization of control. The 3 constraint types that influence these stages are task, environment, and organismic. At the commencement of the program, stage 1 was evident through trial and error of structuring the body in an upside-down vertical line. The body had to adjust to using the core and pelvic positioning for main stability. This was the focus for sessions 1 to 9, creating a half-body vertical coordination pattern to allow for intrinsic feedback to correct the individual's movement pattern to be able to kick up and balance on head and arms. Practicing kickback ups and engaging the core without having to focus on straightening my legs allowed for me to only have to target one area to create balance with support. I tried both, using my left and right leg at different stages to bring my body up to vertical position, to identify which one felt correct to elevate first, followed by the next. This internal feedback clarified that I preferred using my right leg to propel off. Stage 2 was progressed in sessions 10 to 14, where I was able to move into a headstand position, advancing from kicking up with no hold, advancing into session 14, where I was able to propel up and hold the vertical line for 10 seconds. This was a result of practicing the skill in deconstructed states and developing to full task in a variation of environments. These environmental and task constraint changes developed my coordination into a stable attractor state that allowed me to achieve the skill freely. The environmental constraints that allowed me to adapt my coordinative structure included removing wall for support and introducing sound. This allowed for my perceptual landscape to alter and accustom my movement pattern to. Stage 3 was achieved through sessions 15 to 20, where the basic skill was achieved and advanced through increasing constraints. Both environmental and task constraints were introduced to increase the degrees of freedom, which increased the difficulty of performing the skill. This included constant change of environment, which was outdoors on uneven surface with people around and noise. This proved to minimize my focus. However, I was still able to perform skill after repeating and practicing. Task developed with hold time increasing until it reached 30 seconds. This proved I found optimal way to perform skill and developed a functional state of coordination via the constraints-led approach. This is the program I followed for the 20-day 1-hour training program to learn how to perform a headstand. The performance outcomes I achieved. On day 0, a pretest was taken to see if I could perform a headstand for 10 seconds. As a result, I failed this test. Days 1 to 14, I progressed through hourly sessions only when I achieved all goals of the previous session. At day 14, I achieved the end task of performing a headstand for 10 seconds. Days 15 to 20, I progressed my coordinative state and developed it into a functional coordination pattern. At the end of day 20, I was able to perform a headstand in a variable environment holding for 30 seconds. Results. As a result of the program, the learner reached the goal of performing a headstand for 10 seconds. This goal was reached at session 14 after deconstructing the skill into smaller, simpler elements. A pretest was taken, which was a 10-second headstand test. The learner failed at this attempt. Session 1 showed that the skill after no practice was difficult to perform and the individual was unable to achieve the desired results. Sessions 2 to 14 results showed that the individual was developing their ability to self-organize and create a stable state. Each 1-hour session, the individual was able to progress to the following day's program where the task was more difficult as they accomplished the previous goal through the current program. After the learner accomplished the skill of performing a headstand with 10-second hold at session 14, the constraints increased both environmental and task. This increased the learner's functional coordination state and was evident as elements such as noise, people present, and uneven base of support was introduced. She progressed and achieved each session's goals. This allowed her to move on each day, resulting in her adapting to perceptual motor landscapes and performing a headstand for 30 seconds in a variable environment. Testing was conducted and it included a pre-test and post-test, which was a 10-second headstand. The learner also performed a transfer test, which was a headstand. The pre-test results showed that individual failed. Post-test, the individual achieved the desired results, including the transfer test of a handstand. Discussion. Some skills are easier than others to learn, varying in difficulty and degrees of freedom for each individual. The skill of performing a headstand can be learnt through dedication and continuous practice. A headstand can be as basic or advanced as the individual persists. Once they have reached the goal of upside down vertical posture, they are able to increase to a variety of headstand type exercises. In this instance, the goal was to achieve the task of performing a headstand for 10 seconds. This was evidently achieved through Newell's constraint-led approach, as the testing comparison from pre and post showed that the skill was learnt and developed earlier than planned. From pre-test results showing that there was no stability and capacity to perform the headstand to post-test results showing identifying that the learner was able to perform the headstand test for 10 seconds. This proved that providing a hands-off approach was beneficial as the learner predominantly used intrinsic feedback to positively affect the outcome. The program only progressed as the individual could achieve each session's outcomes. This allowed for the learner to gradually progress as the task constraints do not rapidly develop to cater for the organismic constraints of previous no headstand practice. The strengths of this program was the individualized program that allowed the learner to further develop their capability and functional attractor state to perform a headstand in a variety of environments, which entailed an uneven base, absence of a wall for support, noise, and surrounding people. In this current environment, the learner was able to hold the headstand for 30 seconds, which was much longer than anticipated. At the completion of the 20-hour program, the learner achieved exceeding success and clearly identified the 3 stages of Newell's model of motor learning. It was clear that the learner reached stage 3 as the learner developed great control of the task. It was evident they had functional stable state as external constraints were added. Conclusion. A headstand is an unusual concept to grasp as it is not part of most people's daily life. It is, however, a skill that utilizes an unusual posture and positioning of the body that is challenging. Through the performance outcomes and results, it is evident that the individual with no prior training or knowledge of this skill can learn it in 20 hours or less. It has proven using the constraint-led theory that individuals are able to self-address their coordination, and through skill deconstruction, you are able to learn a task. As degrees of freedom change, intrinsic feedback and dynamical systems are identified, you are able to develop a stable state of coordination. The practical applications applied to this skill can be seen mostly in the practice of yoga and can be advanced as the individual chooses. The deconstruction task can be used in reformer Pilates and as a sense of meditation. The practical application of the skill during the program showed that the slow progressions in terms of task constraints assisted in growing the skill ability that allowed the learner to reach their end goal. The program was a success and the learner achieved the results and more.